はい、皆さん、こんにちは。メディアインテグレーションです。本日はですね、UJAM から、新しく登場します、新製品になります、サブクラフトの方ですね、プロダクトオーナー、プロダクトスペシャリストであるアダムさんをですね、お招きしまして、解説の方、していっていただければというところで、進めさせていただきたいと思います。早速ですね、いくつかちょっとこちらで、用意している質問の方がありますので、そちらをアダムさんに質問しながら、実際に実演していただきながら、製品の方の解説をしていっていただければという形ですね。では、早速始めていければと思います。今回紹介を担当していただくのが、UJAM の、アダム・ダゴスティーノさんですね。UJAM の方ではもうすでに3年近くも、この製品の開発だったり、マネージングだったり、こうした実演だったりを担当されているということだそうです。Hello, Adam. Nice to see you.
Hello.
All right.
Nice to see you as well.
Okay, so let's jump into the first question we have. Okay, so this is the products, right?
On the screen, yes. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
It's
So
Subcraft.
Subcraft. ということで、これサブクラフト。こちらがですね、新製品の方の、インターフェースになっております。早速ちょっとですね、最初の質問からしていければと思うので。Okay, so this is first off, what actually inspired you guys to take this challenge of creating an instrument like this 808 style sub-bass instrument?
Yeah. Sure. This project started over 2 years ago, I think. The engineers behind it, our instrument developer and our sound designer, they worked on a prototype together on a very early version, kind of just mostly coming out of the problem at hand. Like, we didn't know how we would sell it or what the product would be, but they kind of just engineered a tool that would be useful for producers and musicians. And it's about sub bass and 808 bass. And the main problem that was felt by producers and audio engineers, that we also felt, because everyone at UJAM is a musician or a producer or an audio engineer. And the main problem is just the inconsistency that comes with sub bass and low end in general in your songs. Most people, when they use sub bass synths or 808 samples, they'll throw like a sample into a sampler and then they'll play their bass line for their production. And there's a lot of issues that happen there, because that sample might have been optimized for one root note, but then the minute you transpose it across 2 octaves, the bass quickly is lost when you play up a few notes or down a few notes. So the power of the bass is completely lost in the mix. There's also a lot of phase issues that a lot of novice producers and novice mix engineers wouldn't know how to fix or pay attention to. And there's all these types of issues with sub bass that make it really hard to monitor well, and also to produce and mix well in your song. So another issue is, you can't hear a lot of bass on smaller speakers that don't have the ability to replicate those lower frequencies. So like on iPhones or phones and laptops, the bass is gone immediately. So there's also work you have to do on the upper harmonics to make that bass cut through your song and also still be audible on smaller speakers. So all of a combination of all of those issues that everyone has, we decided to fix. We decided to build that prototype that's actually different. So the main difference is that most other products for sub bass and 808s, they'll sell you the sounds or a synth that can make the sounds, but then you're on your own. You're in the dark after that in terms of making it sound good through to the final production and the final mix. And so what we've done is we've found the best sounds, but then we also took every subtone, overtone, kick drum, and we pre-processed them for you with professional audio engineers and sound designers. So everything is perfectly in phase. We've tuned every single note to every single sample to every note in the play range. So on the keyboard, if you're seeing the OSK, the GUI here, every note that Subcraft allows you to play has gotten meticulous attention to the detail of every single note. So you're hearing unique samples on every note that are optimized for that note. So it's not just a sample that's being transposed again and again. It's actually a whole unique set of notes, samples per note. So that's kind of the main idea of the prototype was, hey, let's make an 808 engine that also handles everything afterwards, because we knew we could get it to sound better than every other company has done so far.
Mhm. All right, thank you. So, Adam, let's move on to the second question. What is the meaning behind this name of Subcraft?
Yeah. So expanding on the first response there, like all of those uncertainties that people have with sub bass, there's a kind of energy that surrounds sub bass in the music production scene, especially in modern music production genres like electronic music or pop or rap. The genres that feature this type of bass, a lot of the producers, especially those who are starting out or intermediate in skill, they don't actually know the amount of detail that you could do to a sub bass to make it sound like, a platinum winning radio ready song. So a lot of mix engineers who have been around the block and done this quite a lot, they know how to do it because of the years of expertise that they have. So they've tried things, they've learned what they like, they've learned how to replicate certain results on different systems. But a lot of people that buy plugins and shop for plugins, and people like you and me who are just in a DAW making music at home, we don't have all that access. So there's almost this sort of black box of knowledge that comes with sub bass. So we kind of created this creative theme, this creative narrative that relates that sort of mysticism to kind of like conjuring a solution, like like you're speaking into a void and a response is coming back to you, and suddenly all of your sub bass 808 problems are magically resolved. So that's kind of where the name comes from. It comes from an essence of like kind of like witchcraft and sorcery, but there's also some celestial themes in there. You'll see some astrological references in the visuals, but that's where the theme comes from, Subcraft. So it's sub because it's a sub bass engine, and craft because it's kind of like witchcraft. So it's like, finally, this is your magical one-stop solution to sub bass and 808 kick bass.
Okay, thank you. That name explains very well, I guess. Alrighty, so let's move on to the actual Subcraft in action. So could you tell us a little bit about main functions and sounds of Subcraft here?
Yeah, totally. So the first thing that I'll point you to on the GUI here is this middle area. So just to orient yourselves, on the bottom you have an on-screen keyboard. So these are all MIDI notes, as if you have a piano in front of you. So if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you can click on here and you'll hear some notes, but I'm just going to use my MIDI piano while I explain this.
Right.
But so the main area, now that we know how to play notes, the main area to focus on is actually the center area. It's labeled bass. We've been calling this the bass terrain. And so basically it's an interactive region where I can click and drag, and you'll see the tiles sort of animate, indicating my position. But this is really the core of Subcraft, where all of these unique bass sounds, subtones and overtones, are combined into this explorative region. So as I drag around and play notes, you'll hear the sound of the bass changing. And so you'll notice there are a combination of tones. There's really clean subtones that don't have much noise or upper harmonics, and then there's really distorted ones, and there are some that are really noisy, like at the top I noticed. Sounds like there's almost like a vinyl crackle on top of that one. But so every position on this terrain is a completely unique crossfade point between a combination of samples. And so we basically engineered this area to be a combination of subtone samples, which are the lower sub-bass frequencies, and then overtone samples, which are the harmonics. So at every unique position, you're hearing some combination of crossfading between up to 4 samples at a time. So every location on this terrain is a entirely unique sound. So this is the heart of it. And you will notice there's a visual theme here. There's sort of like, and I'll explain what I just did in a minute, but there is sort of, some of them are more full in terms of shape, and then some of them, like this one up here, are smaller shapes, and then there's also a coloring, blue to purple, and that's a visual theme that we've established so you can sort of understand what's happening. So you'll notice that these ones, I'm sorry, there's a setting that I changed that makes it hard to hear, but you'll notice that a lot of these ones are a little cleaner, the ones that have less shape to them. And then these ones that are more full and purple, there's like more weight to them. There's more aggressive, they're noisy. So that helps you navigate as you look at different terrains. And this terrain does change, and I will explain that next. One huge feature of Subcraft that I really love about it is that it's endless, really. It's bottomless. So there's a generation feature here. It says generate new sound if you hover over it. And so basically when you do that, it will generate you a brand new terrain. And so there is a certain number of terrains under the hood, a certain number of samples under the hood in the instrument that are used for these terrains. But every time you generate a new one, it's bringing in new samples, leaving some out. It's changing the size of the grid. And it's also changing the ordering. So every unique position is different. And then there are also some overlaid tonal effects that are baked into some of the terrains. So it is a truly random generation. There's no way to control what's coming out of it when you randomize it. So that's something I really love about it, because we already established that every bass tone, every sound coming out of this instrument has been maximized and processed for bass power, but there's also an seemingly infinite number of sounds within it. So there's a lot of repeat value in it just through this terrain section. But other important features to note are there's a kick module here. And so we have a selection of, I think it's 10 or so kicks that we thought were the best range of types of kicks. And they've also been pre-processed and phase aligned with the sub bass. So if I dial this all the way down, you will not hear any kick drum at the start of the note. I'm going to turn the effects off real quick. And if I dial it up, you'll start to hear the kick coming in. And then if I go past 50%, if I keep going up, you'll actually notice there's an auto ducking feature, so you don't have to sidechain it yourself. And I'm going to check the release settings real quick because it's already kind of short. So now we can hear it better. So you'll see that ducking, and it actually animates to show you what's happening.
Okay. So Adam, can you briefly explain that the kick section and the ducking, how it's interact with each other?
Yeah, sure. So as you dial in the kick drum, basically you could think of this as a separate kick drum signal. So if you don't want to kick, because a lot of 808 sounds, traditionally they have a transient at the start of the attack, which is like a kick drum. So you could dial it all the way off, and then it would basically just be a pure sub bass. But as you dial it in, basically you can think of it as just the level of the kick. So you select which kick drum you want to hear. And then actually there's a one shot on the keyboard down here, which lets you play the kick alone if you want to hear what that sounds like. So these are the different, try to find the key there it is. These are the different kick drums that are in here. And so basically when you're playing notes, every time you play a bass note, it will trigger the kick from the kick module. And then when you go higher values of kick, the presence of the kick starts to take over more, meaning that the sub bass will duck out of the way of it automatically, so you don't get a muddy mix. So at the highest value, you get a really big pumping kind of sensation there. But yeah, that's how the kick module works. It makes sure that the user doesn't have any sort of issues arising when you have a kick on top of a bass, because that is another problem that a lot of producers and beginners have, actually, is keeping that relationship clean and tight.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to other parameters, shall we?
Yeah. One thing I would love to touch on is the phrase player at the bottom. So similar to a lot of UJAM products, there is a phrase player engine built in. And so what that means is it's basically a MIDI looping engine that has a bunch of MIDI parts built into it, in case you don't know what bass line you want to play. So if you're familiar with other UJAM products, this will be easy for you. There's basically a list of styles, and the styles have a recommended tempo from which they were designed. You could pick any of them, though. My session is set to 142 beats per minute, so we could pick anywhere around there, and it should sound pretty good. But when I select a style, basically these loop key switches on the left here, they will change based on what's selected here. And when I click play, you'll hear a bass part start to play. And you see that it just keeps looping as long as it's pressed. As you go up in intensity, these three switches, they get more and more busy. And then there's a stop key here. And then there's a fill. This one at the top is sort of like a fill. So it'll usually fill in some content before going back to the loop. And so if we pick other ones just to show you the variety that comes in here, they're all totally different. And it does base on the note that I played most recently. So I had played a really high note. That's why it sounds like that. If I go down here and then we play it. And then you'll notice next to, so basically these loops, some of them are very fun and helpful if you don't know what bass line you want to write for your song. But the benefit is actually there's a couple of ways to access the MIDI. So if I like this note here, there's also similar to our other UJAM products, there's a handle that we call MIDI drag and drop. So you could click it and drag it out into your session. And then you can edit the notes one by one in your DAW. So if you don't like certain notes that are in it, or you want to change the notes or change the velocities, you could access the MIDI from the style phrases. Alternatively, you could do direct MIDI out and send MIDI info from the plugin in your DAW to another MIDI track that's available in Subcraft as well. But so these are pretty standard loops. They basically follow the style of what's selected in this dropdown, and then you can access them. And then to the right here, you'll notice pitch automation curves. So if I'm playing notes on the right range, and then I'm trying to find the key here. So if I click these, so these are predefined pitch automation curves that you'll notice start doing different things to the sound when you're doing it, and the animation kind of shows you what's happening. It'll go up or down, or it'll do both kind of, and those are also defined by style. And so a lot of these loops actually contain triggers for those pitch automations. So the loop, you'll actually see some of the loops trigger the pitch automations as well. So it really has a way of coming to life when you select a style and then you play certain loops.
Okay, so let's. Do you want to discuss a little bit more about other parameters, or shall we move on? Or
yeah, I can do very quickly a couple of other ones here. So
okay, cool. Let's go over. Yeah.
Just to wrap up the phrase section, there are a couple of buttons that help you. These are related to the phrase engine and the loops. So if you click micro timing, and if you're familiar with UJAM products, there's a timing menu. So it basically allows you to control like a swing feel to the loops. You can half and double time the speeds, and then you can adjust how the loops will play back in your DAW in relation to the playhead. So those are simple. This one here is a latch. So if it's on by default so that the loop will keep playing. And you see that it resets, but if I turn it off, it only plays when I'm holding that note. So that's just a behavior that you can turn on and off. But yeah, that covers the phrase player section. The other main module that you'll notice up here is the effects section. And similarly to the kick module, it's just a simple knob that increases the amount. And this is a preset list of sort of effects that we designed specifically for Subcraft. And we also kept in mind that these had to maintain the integrity of the bass. So some of these are more creative. In short, they are all multi-effects. So our sound engineers and sound designers designed these effects from scratch with a bunch of separate modules and automations. So they aren't ever one specific thing, but you might recognize them. So this one, for example, fancy saturation. If we find a neutral tone. So we can hear it's definitely a saturation, but we don't know exactly what's happening under the hood. And some of them are a little more experimental. So that's a very simple and easy to use effects module. Basically, there's 10 or so cool and interesting effects that you can put on top of whatever sounds you find in Subcraft.
All right, thank you. Okay, so Adam, let's go on to the next question, question 5. So is it possible to use Subcraft alongside the other UJAM products?
Yeah, absolutely. You can use Subcraft alongside any instrumentation or any drums that you want to use. Basically, any song that needs bass, you could use Subcraft in. We do have our virtual bassist plugins for acoustic and like electric bass, like bass guitar. But this is more of a modern bass. So I find myself using Subcraft a lot for modern genres. So EDM and dance genres, electronic genres, modern pop, rap, hip hop, R&B, basically any time that you want a bass and you want something other than a regular bass guitar, Subcraft is perfect. So I find myself using it alongside beat makers a lot, virtual drummers, basically any of our percussion and drum plugins. And then I often lay down virtual pianist or USynth parts to supplement Subcraft. But yeah, absolutely. It can be used with pretty much any instrument under the sun. The only thing you probably wouldn't use it with is another bass track.
Okay, thank you. So this is the final one. So what do you think is the most significant aspect of Subcraft?
Yeah, the thing I would want everyone to remember about Subcraft is that sort of what we touched on in the first question, the reliability that comes with it, and the nature of the name Subcraft, that sort of magical component. I want to use an analogy. When we were developing this plugin for 2 years, the project was frozen on and off as we were trying to figure out how to productize it. But we did have that very first prototype for a long time. And I found myself using that prototype, despite it not being a finished plugin. I was using it on every single one of my modern productions where I wanted sub bass. And the reason I was doing that is because I knew that our talented sound designer and talented mix engineer, who knows more about mix engineering than I do, I know that he had done so much work to make this thing sound the best that it could. And just knowing that, and also hearing the results, you can hear the difference. Just knowing that, I had no other option. I'm not going to go back to my old solution for sub bass because it flops on different notes and it's not as consistent and it's not as engineered. So the one thing I would really want to nail on the head here is that this is the most reliable sub bass instrument you will find on the market. And once you play with it and once you use it, you're not going to want to use a different one once that happens. And we do plan to expand on this product over time. We're going to kind of wait and hear what users want, I think. We have some ideas. But the idea is that we want this to really be your one-stop shop for every sub-bass 808 sound that you would need in a modern production. And that's what I would say.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Adam, for the presentation and all the demonstration. It was a great time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.